For most of military history, survival depended on signals that never made a sound. Long before radios, GPS, or night vision, soldiers communicated danger, movement, and intent through subtle signs that could be read instantly, or, catastrophically misread. These systems worked, but they came with a brutal flaw. They demanded judgment. When armies became larger, faster, and more centralized, that flaw became unacceptable. So the signals were quietly abandoned. What's been lost is not just a set of techniques, but an entire way of thinking about survival and communication under pressure. This is the story of the survival signals armies stopped teaching, not because they were ineffective, but because they were too easy to get wrong. Why silent signaling mattered more than weapons. In pre-radio warfare, communication determined survival more often than firepower. A unit that failed to warn itself of danger died quickly, regardless of how well armed it was. Silent signals evolved because sound gave away position, intention, and strength. Noise invited artillery, ambush, and counterattack. Armies developed hand gestures, body positioning, movement cues, and environmental markers to convey complex information without speaking. These signals worked across languages and units, but only if everyone shared the same understanding. And that was the problem. The danger of signals that relied on interpretation. Unlike spoken commands, silent signals are contextual. A raised hand could mean halt, enemy ahead, danger close, or hold position depending on terrain, posture, and timing. A misplaced stone, broken branch, or disturbed ground could signal friendly movement or enemy deception. Veteran soldiers learned to read these signals instinctively. New troops often didn't. As armies expanded rapidly in the 20th century, especially during the World Wars, the average soldier had less time to train and less experience to draw from. The margin for error shrank. A misread signal didn't just cause confusion, it caused friendly fire, missed warnings, and fatal hesitation. Commanders began favoring clarity over subtlety, even if it meant losing stealth. Ground signs that once meant survival. One of the most common abandoned practices was deliberate ground marking. Small changes to the environment, stones turned a certain way, grass bent or tied, shallow scrapes, were used to mark safe routes, danger zones, or recent movement. These worked because they blended into the landscape. They failed because they were invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly what to look for. Worse, the enemy could learn them, imitate them, or reverse their meaning. In the Second World War, several units experimented with ground signals during reconnaissance and withdrawal. Many stopped after near misses, where friendly units misinterpreted markers and walked into danger. What worked for seasoned patrols proved unreliable at scale. Hand signals that assumed shared instinct. Hand signals still exist today, but what remains is a stripped-down version of a much richer system. Earlier armies used nuanced gestures combined with posture and spacing. The angle of an arm, the speed of movement, even the direction of the body conveyed meaning. These systems assumed familiarity. Soldiers trained together long enough to read each other under stress. In mass conscript armies, that assumption collapsed. A signal meant to indicate enemy moving left might be read as advance left. In combat, seconds matter. Ambiguity kills. So armies standardized signals, reduced their number, and replaced many with verbal commands or technology. Survival became safer, but less flexible. Light and shadow as communication. Before modern optics, soldiers used controlled light, reflections, brief flashes, shielded embers to signal positions and intentions at night. These methods were extremely effective and extremely dangerous. A flash seen by the wrong eyes could draw fire. A reflection misjudged could expose an entire unit. As night combat intensified and artillery response times shortened, the risk outweighed the benefit. Armies replaced subtle light signals with flares, radios, and later infrared systems. The old methods were not wrong. They were unforgiving. Why modern militaries moved away from judgment-based systems? The core issue wasn't effectiveness, it was liability. Silent survival signals require decentralized decision-making and individual judgment. Modern militaries rely on standardization, interoperability, and predictability. Signals that work only when interpreted correctly by experienced individuals don't scale. They break under stress, fatigue, and fear. They also break under bureaucracy. It was safer to teach fewer signals clearly than many signals imperfectly. What history still teaches us? The abandonment of these systems doesn't mean they were flawed in principle. It means they demanded a level of awareness modern systems replaced with technology. For civilians, historians, and survivalists, the lesson isn't to resurrect these signals wholesale. It's to understand why they worked and why they failed. They worked because they forced people to observe, interpret, and think. They failed because not everyone could. Understanding silent signals sharpens situational awareness even if you never use them. You begin to notice movement, disturbance, patterns, and absence. You stop relying on noise and start reading environments. That skill hasn't become obsolete. It's simply no longer taught. The uncomfortable truth. Armies didn't stop teaching these survival signals because technology made them useless. They stopped because modern warfare made mistakes intolerable. One misread signal could undo an entire operation. History reminds us that survival once depended on judgment more than equipment. When judgment failed, the cost was paid immediately. If you want to understand how humans survived before certainty, before radios, before automation, these abandoned systems matter not as techniques to copy blindly, but as reminders of what awareness once meant. If this deep dive added something new to how you think about military history and survival, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who values historical depth over surface detail, and keep exploring the lessons armies learned, and then quietly set aside.